Thanks, Brittany. And thanks to all of you for joining me this morning. I know not all of you are morning people. I'm not a morning person, but coffee is a pretty good motivator, so I appreciate that. I wanted to start by sharing 3 things about myself. Something good to know, something fun to know, and then something you should know. So something good to know, which Brittany kind of touched on, is that I've spent the past 3.5 years running the Speakeasy, which, as Brittany said, is a collaborative workspace for entrepreneurs, and it's located in South Broadpool. I know some of you are members, some of you have been before, but just a kind of a quick history of it. The Speakeasy opened its doors in February 2012, and before that, it looked a little bit like this. Then, it looked like that. I officially became executive director shortly after we opened our doors to the public. And even though my official, and by official I mean paid, start date was after we opened the space, I spent the few months before then pretending to have a job in hopes that it would lead me to getting a job when they finally got money. Amazingly, that worked. So if you're looking for a new opportunity, the best way to do it is go ahead and jump in. So what is the Speakeasy? At its core, it's a place to create, to collaborate, and to learn. During the day, it's a place to co-work, so a place to bring your projects, get your own work done. At night, it's a place to learn through roundtables, through conversations, through meetups. We actually hosted the first CreativeMornings several months ago. And all the time, it's a place to connect and build authentic relationships with the people around you. We are a member-based organization, and our members come from all walks and all backgrounds across Indianapolis. Brittany, our CreativeMornings captain, who I've now talked quite a bit about, is a member, and so is a local full-time corporate magician. So there's not really a cookie-cutter kind of aspect of who you are. But what is common amongst all of our members is the entrepreneurial spirit and a commitment to contributing to the bigger ecosystem beyond their own work. Now, something fun to know. My oldest sister has a rabbit named Bunny. I have a dog named Moose. Sometimes she's a little bit more literal than I am. And then there's something that you should know. So speaking of my siblings, I include this slide in pretty much every presentation I give. There's a couple reasons for that. First is my siblings don't live in Indy, so they have no idea that I show this picture to everybody. Second is someone at some point told me if you show a semi-embarrassing picture of yourself in a presentation, you become a little bit more relatable. And I think we can all agree that I am an adorable bunny in this picture. But the biggest reason that I love this picture is I think it really demonstrates the creativity that I grew up around. So I'm sure you figured out this is from Halloween. It's also why we asked you for your favorite Halloween costumes. And as you've gone person to person, you got to my brother at the end, and maybe you noticed that he is both a skeleton and Sherlock Holmes. Because why not? Why be one thing in isolation if you can find a creative way to bring different things that would otherwise be unrelated together? And I've learned a lot from my siblings, not just about how to make awesome Halloween costumes, but also how to collaborate. And when you're a kid, collaboration really is in the form of sharing or doing something together or doing something because they suggested you should. And that's the thing about collaboration. It's a great way to work and come together and build new things, but when you do something because you're told to do it, that's not totally collaboration. So when I did things because my siblings told me to do it, and I found out that sometimes they lie. And it's not that doing something because it brings you together isn't a great reason to do it, and doesn't add value, but it definitely is not collaboration. Which got me to thinking that a lot of people use collaboration to describe a lot of things that are also lies and not collaboration. And part of that is the word collaboration has become a buzzword. So what isn't collaboration? Well, I went to my network and I went to my friends and I asked them to give me some examples. Here's what they said. Would you be willing to tweet a list of pre-written tweets for an upcoming event of mine because you have more followers than I do and I'm sure they'd really appreciate this content? Or would you be willing to share your attendee contact information from that thing you hosted that I didn't attend? Because I'm hosting something and it would be really nice of you to help me reach them. Would you consider keeping our logo on your website? Because I was CC'd on a couple of those early emails, and even though I never showed up to any meetings, you know I care, and I just ran out of time. I love this one. Would you mind connecting me to your donors or your investors and encouraging them to support me? Because, you know, we're really not competing, and if they give us money, you can say that you helped us grow. And this is my favorite. I know your company did most of the work on this, and you put in most of the resources, you put in the brawn, but you know, we're better known in the community for doing that sort of work, so you might consider putting our name on it. I'm sure some of these are resonating with some of you. I can tell kind of you're laughing because perhaps you've been in this experience. And in my opinion, most of those are like pretty horrible reasons to do something, but not all of them are. And if you're in a position to help someone, you should. And if it's mutually beneficial for you to help that person, that's even better. But mutually beneficial isn't actually the same thing as collaboration. So I have two big thoughts on what collaboration is. First is it's things versus the process that shapes things. And Jack Hess actually coined that term, so I want to give him credit. And the second is how is the thing you're creating adding value to not yourself? And because these are big thoughts, we're going to break them down. So first, things versus the process that shapes things. So a thing might be developing a new brand, it might be creating an event, coming up with a new company initiative, designing a new program, designing a new building. It's really whatever you're working on creating. But when it comes to collaboration, it's the process that we're using to create that tells us whether or not it was collaborative. So if you think back to the list of collaboration, the common thread between all of those examples that I gave you was one person guessing what the other person cared about and what the other person was going to value. But it was all based on assumption. No one ever talked about the needs, the wants, the values, the objectives, the audience, the perspective, any of that about what you might be focused on and what the other person might be focused on. And it's that process that will tell you whether or not you even want to collaborate. And if you do want to collaborate, what that looks like. And I say if because a lot of times when you start talking about what you're hoping to get out of something or what you're really about, you might find that it in fact doesn't align. So when you're working with someone on a project, the collaboration has to start way before the thing is fully created. And the process itself is not cookie cutter, but there are some core aspects that I think are universally where you're going to begin. And the collaborative process starts with understanding your own who, what, and why. And then, once you understand your own who, what, and why, understanding your partners or your potential partners who, what, and why. Now, before you get all excited and think, I know my company really well, maybe I started my company, so I know my own business, who, what, and why, I can skip that step. You definitely can't. And that's because not every process, not every project, not every initiative is going to be for your entire business or for all of your clients. And really understanding what are you trying to get out of that unique experience is fundamentally important. And the who, what, and why that you establish generally is probably at the 50,000-foot view. And that's great because you know your business and you know what generally you want to accomplish. But when you invest the time in understanding this particular project, you're going to help your partners understand where you're coming from. And they're going to help you understand where they're coming from because you have shared your who, what, and why, and you have spent time understanding where those things intersect. So only once you've had that conversation do you know if you want to work together and if you want to build, something great. Which, by the way, could you imagine building this out of Legos? My patience is not that long. All right, so that brings us to the second point. How is the thing you're creating adding value to not yourself? Inherently, you're going to think about yourself. Because we're human, and that's what we do. And I hope you all get this joke. This point is designed for you to really think about your fellow collaborators and not to think about yourself. So since before this and before you started creating, you spent time understanding the who, what, and why of everyone at the table, and you weeded out all the folks that really for this particular opportunity did not align with what you were trying to accomplish. Everything you do, all the things you create, the solutions you create, should be aligned with what you've decided are your points of intersection. If the things you're creating are only advancing you towards your goals and you've kind of forgotten about the other person, that's not collaboration. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean there aren't going to be parts of what you create that are only going to add value to one person. There will be. And no company or no individual is likely to invest resources, whether it's time or energy or money, without some type of return on investment. But there does need to be a balance between you getting what you need, that your partner getting what they need, and you both creating things that were only created because you work together. If, at the end of the day, you walk away, and I know some people this happens because it's happened to me, and you think, you know what, I could have gotten to that exact same outcome by myself, you failed at collaborating. And you're too nice to fail at collaborating, or at least I kind of hope you are, or you're too smart and you're too invested in this process by that point. So the things that you create that you actually didn't get any value from that only advanced your partner, you should still be proud of because you still contributed towards advancing them. And they should be excited about the things that they helped you create. And since you're both happy, you're both kind of moving yourselves towards your goals, that co-ownership extends to all of your successes. And by the way, if it doesn't work out and you kind of royally fail, that's okay too. You get to own that together as well. All right, so just to kind of recap everything we've now gone over, maybe you remember what the speakeasy is. Maybe you remember that I have a dog named Moose, and that you too can be both Sherlock Holmes and a skeleton. So what happens when you grow up? But most importantly, hopefully you have a better understanding of what collaboration isn't, that collaboration is about the process of creating things, and that collaboration should lead you someplace you would never have gotten to go by yourself. So thank you so much for listening to my thoughts. I truly appreciate you, and hopefully you enjoyed your pairings and your coffee.
All right, do we have any questions? Okay, I'll start. What is your personally biggest collaboration success or failure?
Could you all hear Brittany's question? So biggest collaboration success or failure. So I actually like to use one of my favorite examples from the speakeasy, and they happen to both be here, so that's great. So you have two members who I'm actually going to point out. So one is Graham with USI, who can raise a smile, and the other is Tom Hanley with 913 Sports. So Graham, do you guys know USI, the brand, clothing company? So, and Graham, feel free to jump into this too. So to me, Graham's brand is really about advancing Indianapolis and kind of making a statement about who you are and reclaiming the pride of being in Indiana and being in our city. So he makes fantastic, all sorts of products, but most well known are probably the t-shirts that I know I have like 8 of. I'm sure you all have plenty of. And Tom runs a nonprofit that focuses on bringing youth fitness and wellness programs into schools and youth organizations. And these are two seemingly different businesses. You have a nonprofit, you have a for-profit, you have one that's working on advancing fitness and wellness, you have one that's focused on t-shirts. There's not necessarily a whole lot of overlap there, except for the two of them are smart enough to sit down and talk about their own core values, and they ended up creating, a t-shirt that specifically goes back, the funds of that t-shirt go back to 913 Sports. And so the Ride Indiana line, when you buy those shirts, not only are you then getting to represent USI, but you're also then contributing towards something else. So I think that was kind of a fun intersect and kind of has turned into a great product.
Yeah, the shirts are cool.
Yeah. Other questions? Thoughts? Any really cool Halloween costumes? Best collaboration I can ever imagine. I don't necessarily know if I have one on the top of my mind, but what I would say is I think there's a lot of awesome kind of thriving communities in Indianapolis. So I think more opportunities that you have people from different backgrounds working together. So whether that's sports and art working, art communities working together. I can tell you one of my personal projects for 2016 is to tailgate an art opening. To kind of create that juxtaposition between kind of the sports culture and the arts culture. So I don't have necessarily a specific one, but just more opportunities that are, building bridges from different silos of our bigger city. Yeah, and you're all invited to that future tailgate, by the way.
Yeah. What are the top things that can hold people back from actually collaborating?
Yeah, so I would say that the top things people that hold someone back from collaborating often is ego. So people are really unwilling to share candidly with someone else. Generally, it's for fear of they might take that idea, they might, what if my donor actually did contribute to them too? Does that mean I lost money because they have another interest? And in my experience, that just doesn't happen. So if you're really truly invested in working together, it's not really about your ego because you really believe that you're building something together and you're getting someplace you otherwise couldn't have gotten other than for working with someone else. Yeah.
So when collaboration kind of goes off the rails, what are some good ways to get it back on the track and get going?
Absolutely. So if collaboration kind of starts to go awry, generally it's kind of sitting back down and saying, hey, where did we start? Like, it's a gut check, right? So I'm a big fan of saying, are we still on our mission? Are we still on task? Are we still doing the things that we said we wanted to do? I know, and that's as simple as, at the beginning of every meeting, maybe you go through, this is our objective, this is our audience, this is our who, what, and why for this program. I know it's something I do a lot in my meetings, simply to make sure everyone is sitting down with the right frame of mind. So instituting stuff like that you're kind of using as a regular integrated gut check can be really helpful. Yeah.
Can you talk about a little bit about how you started with Speakeasy and how you got people to come in?
Yeah.
You always get involved with Speakeasy?
Yeah, absolutely. How many people here have been to the Speakeasy? All right, so good number of you, which is awesome, by the way. Thanks. So I got involved. So there are 4 founders of the Speakeasy, of which I'm not one of them. So the 4 of them were kind of around, and at the time, I was on a mission to meet cool people doing cool things, which is a really nice way of saying I was unemployed. So I took a lot of people out for coffee and beer. But so I started hearing about kind of the Speakeasy and what the founders were hoping it would become. And I'm not kidding when I say I truly just kind of pretended to have a job. So I got 4 introductions to Christian Anderson, who was one of the founders, in the same week, and then I showed up where he would be speaking, and I just introduced myself. I was like, hi, I'm Denver, and he's like, I keep hearing your name, and I'm like, I wonder why. He later figured this out. But I went to them and I said, hey, can I throw this event for you? Can I organize this program for you? And it honestly, we just kind of made it up. So I knew that the hope for the founders was to create a place where people could learn how not to screw up their businesses, basically. And there's this really strong feeling of manufactured serendipity. So if you get all these people who have a similar core values, core interest in entrepreneurship together, then inherently, if you can create opportunities for them to meet, to connect, to talk, that they will eventually work together or find ways to help one another. So in terms of how we got people through the door, a lot of it was through programming, a lot of it was through word of mouth. The biggest part of it was really seeding that core group of the founding 50 members, because they were who taught everyone else how to act at the space. So it's nice to have a list of rules on the wall, but if you walk in and you're going to observe how everyone else is interacting with something, and you're going to follow suit with that. And that also follows back to collaboration, right? So if you join a project that other people are already working on, you're going to see how are they interacting with each other, how open and candid are they, and you're going to follow that. So it's really, they kind of modeled that behavior and made sure others are modeling the behavior they wanted in the space to make it grow. Yeah. Yeah.
What does that say on it's kind of related to that? What would you say is a key feature to be easy to facilitate collaboration?
So I think one of our biggest things is hosting so many outside organizations and groups. So I know in 2014 we hosted something like 78 meetup groups, which is a ton. And they're around themes that are related back to the speakeasy. So all of them are entrepreneurial in some capacity. So making sure that it is a member-based organization, and if you attend every meetup and never join, that's kind of hard for us. But at the same time, it was a great way to kind of introduce people to the space and bring in people who maybe weren't ready to join as members, but wanted to know, what is this about? What are the values of the space? What is it like to be here? And that gives them an opportunity kind of to test the waters and figure out, does this align with, where I want to be, and how do I kind of continue to grow that? Yeah. Other questions?
You seem like a very passionate facilitator of collaboration. What are some tips that you've seen that have worked to connect the right people to bring that collaboration together?
So I'm a big fan of, so I hate the word networking because I think networking gets a really bad rep. So I tend to think if you can connect people for reasons beyond work, that's a great way to begin relationships. So if you know that someone loves, I'm a Dodgers fan, I grew up in Southern California. So if you know someone else loves the Dodgers in town, that's a great way to connect us, and then later we can talk about work. So really kind of finding more authentic things to help people begin building relationships is one way. Also, building relationships before you need them, right? So there's a level of authenticity that you're able to establish if you've known someone for a long time, and then you begin working on a project together, as opposed to, I've never talked to you before, I don't know who you are, now what? And so it's more if you have a long-standing relationship, it's much easier to approach somebody. And that's also part of it, is being involved with things outside of your world. So, I run the speakeasy, and it's kind of in the tech entrepreneurial, it's not limited to tech, but it is primarily, it's in the entrepreneurial space, but I'm equally involved in a bunch of things that have nothing to do with entrepreneurship, because I don't necessarily know what projects I'm going to be involved in next. So really that kind of general knowledge about what other people are interested in, other ways that people are doing things, and what else they care about. Anything else? Awesome.
All right.